Yeah, all right. Part 2 with Pete, May 31st, 2020. Yeah, I was asking, what do you think of the whole Obamagate?
Well, I think it's another one of those situations where I don't necessarily have all the information. I can tell you from the perspective that I see it from, that...
Well, go ahead and kind of summarize the situation that is, quote, I always use air quotes, quote unquote Obamagate. Yeah, like just kind of summarize and go ahead and sort of inject your opinion.
From my understanding, what the current administration is discussing with this is that Obama's administration was, from their perspective, spying on the campaign. I don't know that I would categorize it in that way. I think that personally, there were some hinky things going on. I don't know that it was necessarily like Donald Trump. I don't know that it was necessarily at high levels I think there were some high levels within his campaign where people knew that there was information being shared with some shady sources that had some loose affiliation potentially with foreign governments. How much of that they really understood, I don't know, because we're not privy to that information. They've dropped the charges against Michael Flynn, which I think is a little weird since he'd already pled guilty. It's one of those things that it's been proven, and I do believe that the Soviet government was intending to interfere in our election. Now, again, whether Donald Trump personally was like, "Yeah, great, let's go." I don't know. So what I'm alluding to there is that I think that there was a legitimate reason for the Obama administration, being the current government administration at the time, to look at that. Now, again, I don't have all the information, I'm not familiar with the law related to it, but the way it's being portrayed currently is that they used some bullshit to get
the
warrants.
FISA warrant.
Yeah. Is that an accurate characterization of it? I don't know. Again, I don't have all the information. I think that, and this is just based on what I see with Donald Trump and his history of decades of being a very dishonest person and not following the rules of anything, really, ever. I tend to think that there was a reasonable excuse for something to be looked at. Now, again, we're all policies and procedures followed. I don't know. I think you would probably agree with me that the FISA courts and whatever are a little sketchy to begin with.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
It could be that is pretty flimsy.
Yeah.
Burden of proof there to get those things to go through, and that could be an overreach of the government, but I don't know that necessarily falls on Obama's lap because that was established prior to him. Now, did they take advantage of that loosey-goosiness of it? Potentially.
Yeah.
But is that still playing within the rules that they were given? It's a shady political game in a lot of ways on all ends. You play the cards that you're dealt, and sometimes the deck is stacked. I don't know. I think, Donald Trump not being previously a politician, I have no doubt that he didn't give a shit about the rules.
Well, he doesn't know what the rules are.
Yeah.
There was so many times that people from his administration, he would tell them to do something, and they'd be like, well, I'm not going to do that because it's illegal.
It's illegal. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, the people that were running the campaign. You got convictions and guilty pleas on a lot of things related to this. So, was that pushed? I don't know. The thing of it was, the Obama administration wasn't out there shouting it to the media for one thing. You know,
well, with very good reason.
Right.
Well, so here's my kind of perspective and understanding on it. Yeah, the FISA courts, all of it being very shady. From my perspective, what I understand of the situation, I find it like the word "gate" gets thrown onto
On
onto so many things,
Yeah.
because of its association with, to try to associate with the Watergate scandal.
Yes.
And like, here's this one thing where it's like they actually like are very similar. Where basically, Nixon was using the CIA to commit illegal acts to spy on the Democrats who were set up in the Watergate Hotel.
Right.
And yeah, like, so my peripheral understanding of this is Obama used the FISA courts to shadily spy on the Trump administration during the campaign, and then once they won the election, they kind of had to go, oh shit, he's gonna find out we were doing all of this pretty shady shit, and then tried to like cover it up and unmask Flynn, and then tried to get him to the FBI basically has in their internal documents, from what I understand, have admitted that they basically tried to get Flynn to lie and admit to a crime that he didn't commit. So yeah, I mean, again, how much did Obama directly oversee any of this? Mm-hmm. Hard to say or no. But I find it very fitting that it's called Obamagate, because I feel like for once it actually has this weird relation to Watergate. How it's kind of the same thing happening.
Well, I can see some parallels there.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't hire people to break in that weren't a part of the government, which I think is the bigger part of Nixon's problem.
Absolutely, but this sort of gives a lot of weight to the quote-unquote deep state, conspiracy that I've been trying to freaking reject for over 3 years now. It's like, oh, wow, is this really a thing where there's a lot of people within the bureaucracy who favor Democrats and will do whatever they can to keep Democrats in power and push their agenda even if they lose?
Well, I think maybe, and this again is just my perspective on it, would be that it's not so much that they favor Democrats, but as you pointed out,
they favor
Donald
government.
Trump doesn't know what the hell's going on.
Oh yeah.
And, I mean, I think there were numerous people in the government realm that, when Trump was elected, they're like, well, as long as there are people around him to keep him at bay, we're going to be all right. And I think ultimately any president, that's the case. I mean, if there are...
Yeah.
A lot of times it matters more the quality of the people that are around them than the person themselves, because ultimately they shouldn't have total control. But we've seen with Trump that if he doesn't like what you're saying, he's just going to fire your ass, which I think is sort of the antithesis of the Lincoln concept. Oops, did we lose everything? All right, there we're back. The concept that Lincoln had of having a cabinet of different-minded people who would present other opinions. And, as much as Trump has tried to say that he appreciated the party of Lincoln, which, again, that's a whole other discussion, but he's sort of the antithesis of Lincoln in that he doesn't want other opinions. He wants your opinion to be in lockstep with his. And, he ran a business that way, and he had some success, and he had some just outright failures that if he didn't have a significant monetary backing prior, he would be destitute, But he had he had the ability to fuck up and still keep going.
Yeah.
Most of us don't have that luxury.
Right.
So I mean, as far as the deep state, I mean, are there ingrained within our nation's capital government people, longtime employees that have perspectives? Sure. I think that the people that I've met, and I haven't met a lot of maybe national level, but I mean, a lot of state level government employees who have been involved for a long time. And most of the people that I've met and known truly are dedicated to wanting to do good and better things. Again, that's not all of them. I mean, I've also met people who have said, I'm getting a government job because I want to put my feet up and not do anything. So those people exist too, no question. But there are a lot of incredibly dedicated and smart people who are working real hard. So again, is there a perspective out there that they're anti-Trump? That's a distinct possibility, but I don't think it's because he's a Republican.
Well, I don't think the deep state conspiracy is. I mean, it might inherently be anti-Trump.
Sure.
Because of what he said he would accomplish. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use air quotes again. Right. Drain the swamp.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, again,
he filled that fucker.
Right? Like I guess I feel like I guess the conspiracy of the quote unquote deep state sort of not being like just like the result is that the people are anti-Trump, or that they work against Trump. But I think the conspiracy is that they are inherently pro-Democrat and will, like I said, sort of do whatever they can to, push the progressive agenda despite who's in office. A sort of eternally growing government, maybe, as somebody who's a small government guy,
right,
and who, again, I've been trying to reject this deep state conspiracy, this just sort of like gives a lot of weight to it.
Well, there is, I think, inherent in government work a need or a want of self-preservation, perhaps. Like it was interesting. I just watched the first couple episodes of that Space Force with Steve Carell.
Yeah.
Which is obviously satirical send up of a lot of this stuff. But one of the things that he said, he's like appearing in front of this committee that has like a Nancy Pelosi type and whatever, and one of the things that he was being questioned about is like by an AOC type character that they have is, why did this orange cost $10,000 to send into space? Which is a legit question and probably similar to something that
would happen on the floor.
Yeah, and similar to something that AOC would probably bring up herself. And these are obviously caricatures of our political landscape. But he made an interesting comment in his character as this general who's in charge of the Space Force, and he said, as long as I've been in the military, it hasn't been about money. And while this is a satirical thing, I think there's something fairly accurate about that perspective, that, within government, it's not always about being cost effective. It's about, we're going to get this done at any cost. And that's not always wise, and certainly wouldn't work in the private sector, if you will. But it's also fair to say that government is not the private sector, nor should it be, and it's not going to work the same way. People compare running the government to running a business, and I don't know that is a fair comparison. because a business doesn't provide services without the expectation of some sort of monetary
Profit.
exchange or whatever.
Yeah.
And the government, in my line of thinking anyway, shouldn't be a profit-driven thing. And that's not to say that you shouldn't have some value for your service, because you should. I look at my only experience. Again, I've never worked at the federal level, but I've worked with state government, county government, tribal government, and not in a position where I have any power, but just a position where I can observe the way things operate or don't. And, I look at like the county, and when I worked for the jail, and the county board looking at it saying, why isn't this jail making us any money? Well, let's look at that for a minute, shall we? We shouldn't be profiting from a jail. It's a service that's provided to the community. It's an unfortunately necessary service. Could that service be changed, reformed, all these things? Absolutely. But when they started to implement things like pay for stay and all these things where you're billing people to be in the jail.
Yeah.
Now, I know people commit crimes and they're sentenced and whatever, but
the Constitution. One of the things in the Constitution is laws against unfair fines and fees.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to jail and then you're getting a fee that I'm assuming changes depending on how long you're there.
Yep.
It's that's inherently unconstitutional, in my opinion.
I would agree, and it's a daily fee, and so you're taking a person who is not having a real good time to begin with, maybe doesn't have a lot of resources, and so let's say, the sort of the thing that I use frequently is I look at it and say somebody gets maybe their second DWI or something, they get sentenced to 90 days, which is something that can happen. So let's say they're kind of down on their luck anyway. They maybe had a not very good paying job, and they're renting an apartment, and now they're not maybe going to go to work for 3 months, and they're maybe not going to pay their rent for 3 months. So, because I don't know a lot of jobs. Some people can go out on work release, but that you have to pay for too.
Yeah.
And I don't know many jobs that are going to say, okay, we're going to hold on to your slot for 3 months.
Yeah.
And I don't know a lot of landlords who are going to go, oh, you're not paying your rent for 3 months, so that's fine. We'll just wait until you get out.
Yeah.
So you're removing oftentimes what little resources a person has, and then on top of it, charging them an additional fee for the privilege of losing all of their resources. So it's adding insult to injury in a way that, in my opinion, keeps people from ever hoping to be remotely successful.
Did anybody ever suggest an idea that rather than charging these people money, because I understand a government needs to function off money, right? And as somebody who's a libertarian, I'm inherently anti-income tax and anti-property tax. So, income tax or sales tax is just the way to go. But okay, anyways, aside from that, back to jails. So did anybody at some point say, rather than charging these people money, why don't we find a way to make the jail make some income and use the people as labor? Like, something as simple as cleaning up the highways.
Yep. And they have
shoveling. A program could grow. We can get grants. We can teach these people some basic skills. Maybe we can just get some simple tools and teach them to make birdhouses. And now we sell Crow Wing County birdhouses, and they're made by
Yep.
You know, they make $2 an hour, whatever ridiculous low thing you're going to pay them because they're in jail, and you sell the birdhouses really cheap. And you know what? I'm just spitballing
well,
here.
and they do
did anything
that.
like that come up?
They do that in the Minnesota prison system. You know, I mean, it's not for everybody. I mean, you got to qualify for it, whatever. But some people do that, and they're able to produce that way. But and in the jail, they used to have a program called STS, Sentence to Service, where if you worked a day on the crew, you got a day off your sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Then they reformed that a little bit, and it was like you got a day off for every 2 days you worked and whatever. And so this was a Minnesota state program, if I recall correctly. I may have some of this information wrong because it's been a while since I was involved with this, but it was, I believe, through the Minnesota Department of Corrections. I could be off, but you know, so they had a couple of gentlemen who were crew leaders that, you know, were trained and knowledgeable and experienced in running crews and whatever, and you could go out, and then that was what it was. They were crews that they cleaned up ditches. They go out to Camp Confidence and help clean things, and they did every year. They set up for the JC's fishing tournament. You know, they do all that kind of stuff. And there were some inherent difficulties with that. The program wasn't perfect. I mean, we used to have one of my favorite like gross stories at the jail is guys that would they get bag lunches when they'd leave, you know, and they're wrapped up in cellophane. And the crew leaders would always stop by a gas station, and guys, if they had a couple bucks on them, they'd buy a pop or whatever. And you know, that wasn't a problem. But every now and then, these goofballs would think they're going to smuggle some chew back in, because tobacco in the jail is at a premium if you can get a hold of it, and you can't. You can't get it. So these guys are going on work release and stuff, and because we'd strip search them on the way back in, right? So they'd take the cellophane of their sandwich and they'd wrap the chew in it and they'd keister it, right? So we affectionately called it Poopenhagen. But it was true. I mean, these guys.
Can you imagine if that thing bursts?
Oh no! Yeah, you'd be a little sick, I would imagine. But,
and the burning.
Oh yeah. But so these guys would come in, you know, and it's cellophane. It's not like it's in a balloon or something, or a condom or something that's meant to be inside a human body. Right. You know, and it's wrapped up. So, I mean, there were times that we had, you know, discovered it as it came back in. And you could literally see fecal matter intermixed in the. I mean, it was terrible. And I mean, people are paying to get ass chew from some dude. you know. I mean, so you know, contraband, if you will, coming back into the facility. I mean, and that's a rather innocuous. You know, story. I mean, certainly other things are worse.
Oh yeah. Well, if you're cleaning up the highway, you have your buddy throw cocaine out on in the spot or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
in the balloony.
Yeah, absolutely, and so there were some inherent problems, and people to qualify for that program were supposed to be like absolutely lowest risk, and there were, you know, whatever, they had to qualify to be able to go. And I don't think they actually even operate that program anymore because I think the funding was cut to it. But you're right, because it should be one of those things that, because there's a benefit to the community at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, you can you start at the very bottom of them, like cleaning up the roads. Yeah, there's a benefit to the community to that. Eventually the program can grow, and maybe you can teach these people some skills. Well, and they can get a job when they get out.
There's a movie that I think is pretty good. I mean, it's Hollywood and it's dramatized and whatever, but it's called First Time Felon, and it's got Omar Epps in it.
I don't know who that is.
He was in like that football movie, The Program, and he's been in a few other things. It's a pretty good movie, but basically the story is that one of his buddies shoots somebody, and he's there, and he gets popped on an accessory charge, but he gets sent to this like boot camp, right? And you know, this kid growing up on the streets didn't have any real parental supervision, and you know, so he gets sent to this military style boot camp in prison, and they, you know, teach him some discipline and teach him some self-esteem and you know, being able to, kind of learn some skills and stuff, and they end up going to this small town in Iowa that's flooding. And, this is made in the mid-'90s, I think, when that was happening pretty frequently. And so they're sandbagging this community. So there's a lot of African-American gentlemen in a real white-bread Iowa town where, there's this distrust at first, obviously, because they're like, why are these criminals who don't look like us here? But they end up working next to each other and eating meals together, and they start to recognize that, hey, you know what? Yeah, we come from different backgrounds, but we're all just trying to help, and we're not bad people, and blah, 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 both sides, which is a real beautiful part of that film. But then he gets released, right? And he's got these skills. Like, they teach you some trade or whatever. And you can do that in prison these days, too. But when you get released, then you got this felony record. And you go to apply for a job.
Yeah.
You ain't going to get one. You go to try to get a place to live. Ain't nobody going to rent to you. I mean, this is the stuff that I deal with my clients all the time.
Yeah.
Is that even though we can help them financially to get established, we can't get anybody to rent to them, and we can't get anybody to hire them.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that as an employer, you have a right.
And they don't get to vote anymore.
Right.
Good God.
Yeah, I mean,
so
the
they don't even have
disenfranchisement.
they don't have any way to change the laws.
Absolutely.
That affect them the most.
Yeah, and, there's a lot of, criminal justice reform is a huge topic, certainly, but the point of once a person has paid their debt to society, as they've if you want to label it that way, they've been sentenced, they've completed that sentence. I mean, in Minnesota, you're always typically released on, I shouldn't say always because it's not always, but typically you're released on some form of probation or supervision, so you're still technically under a sentence, and you're finishing that. However, the Department of Corrections does an awful lot of evaluating and assessing and making sure that is going to be okay, because believe me, they don't want to mess that up.
Right.
So, and I talk with DOC agents all the time. I've had conversations with the person who's in charge of that for the Department of Corrections for the state of Minnesota. So I'm pretty familiar with it, and I know what these people do, and they do a pretty damn good job. Are they perfect? Nope, because nothing is. But, they for what they do pretty well. And, so they're releasing folks, but they're releasing them back into places where they, like you said, they can't vote, they got no opportunity. What the hell are these people supposed to do? I mean, yeah, they made mistakes. Yeah, they made poor choices. Could they make poor choices and mistakes again? Absolutely. But I say the likelihood of them doing that when they have proper support and the ability to participate in their community and be a productive member of society and gain some self-worth again is a lot lower than if you put them out there and just say, fuck you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we were saying before, criminal justice is it is such a deep, and it starts from the bottom and all the way through to, like the fact that it, just you laid it all down. I have no retort. I completely agree with you.
Sure.
It's absolutely a shame that our society just sets up so many people to fail. And there's so many things that are a felony.
Oh my God, yes. And particularly when you started looking at the drug charges as they changed through the 80s and 90s. And I'll say Joe Biden's no friend of mine on this bullshit either.
Right? No kidding.
But it's one of those things where they start putting in mandatory minimums and 3 strikes laws and things like that. So somebody who maybe was a violent felon early in their life, and then later in life they get busted selling a bag of weed, and now all of a sudden they're sitting with 30 years. What, are you kidding me with this shit? This makes no sense.
Yeah.
But a lot of what has happened for sometimes good and sometimes terrible reasons is the judging comes out of the judges, and there are these mandatory sentencing guidelines and things. I mean, if you look at sentencing in the state of Minnesota, again, I'm not an expert, but I've had a lot of experience working within this system for a long time, that, you know, they have sentencing guidelines that says if you have this amount of felony points and your current charge falls into this category or that. I mean, there's a grid that judges look at when they're being sentencing or when they're in their sentencing process. And, you know, the judge does have the ability to deviate from those sentencing guidelines, but they have to justify it. And they do sometimes. I mean, they can, downward departure is what they call it. If they go down, upward they can go as well. You know, but it's like there's a lot less judgment and there's more of just process, if that makes some sense. I mean, it's just like, you did this, boom, you're done, this is what's happening. And the fact of the matter is, the good part of having judges is that each individual situation differs. You know, you may commit similar crimes, whatever, but they're, you know, in some cases, you know, people, I mean, like self-defense and whatever, I mean, I know we're not going to hopefully convict anybody of, you know, murder if it's a self-defense thing, but it happens. It has happened, you know. But so taking out the ability for the judge to really have a lot of leeway on what they do there is somewhat problematic.
Absolutely.
You know, and I mean, that's not to say that judges there's some pretty bad ones out there too, who make poor choices.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's an appeals process and whatever. I mean, most judges really don't want to lose their judgment on an appeal. Yeah. So I think they're typically fairly conscious of, is this going to hold up if they challenge it? At least that's supposed to be how that check and balance part of that system works, although it doesn't always work that way. But, I mean, it's just such a weird and clunky and difficult process that so many people don't get. I mean, unless you've had any involvement in the criminal justice system, there's no way you know. I mean, you watch Law and Order. They kill somebody, they go to court, they get convicted, they go to jail. Yeah. Right?
Yeah,
you know?
They skip all of the boring details.
Oh, and it can take years, years, this process. And not even just for murder charges. I mean, there's drug charges, whatever, people just sitting there.
Yeah.
Because, and that's, you know, another part, the cash bail system that is so inherently
unconstitutional.
Terrible. Yeah, you know, I mean, so if you can afford it, you're out, man.
Yep.
If you can't, you're sitting. I mean, now they give you at least the
much for a speedy trial.
Well, at least they give you a little Vaseline on this one because they will give you credit for time served.
Right.
But it's not the good Vaseline. It's like the generic. You know. So but the thing is, so if you have the means, and that's the problem, you know, and that's where I think criminal justice falls into this greater conversation of just societal equity, is that if you have the financial means, in so many situations, it creates more opportunity for you, and if you don't, you have far less opportunity out the gate.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, and again, I mean, I get the world's not equal and shit happens and whatever, you know, but within that system, that is a thing that could be changed. And I think we need to look at the fact that, I mean, we don't want to be re-releasing violent and dangerous people back into the community. But the cash bail system is not necessarily a deterrent to that.
Yeah.
It's just a deterrent to people who don't have any
financially,
money. Yeah, you know. I mean, and these bail bondsmen, I mean, I know one guy and I think he's an ethical person, and I think he's doing his best to try to help people, but I know there are some shady bastards out there too who take advantage of people. And, you know, I mean, you got these little old grandmas and stuff that are putting their house up as collateral to get their relative out of jail, and then they skip out or whatever. And I mean, there are just some really shady predatory practices that come out as a part of that. And I mean, again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on the entire community, because I do know that there are some good and ethical people out there that are really trying to do the right thing. But overall, the system is really skewed toward the wealthy, or not even wealthy, but just people that have some financial means. I mean, I've been arrested once in my life. I was able to bail out because I have access to people who have the ability to do that. You know, it's, you know, a lot of people don't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And to have them sit there again, I mean, when particularly on nonviolent offenses and stuff like that, when, you know, so maybe somebody's partying on the weekend and they get, like I said, they get picked up on their second DWI. Again, it's a problem. Don't drink and drive. But, you know, and they don't have the cash to bail out, or the ability to pay a bail bondsman. You know, like I said, they get picked up on a Friday. You know, maybe, you know, they may not go to court till Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so maybe their job forgives them for missing a day or two. But if they don't have the ability to bail out, now they just lost their job. You know, again, they made a mistake. They need to be held accountable for that choice.
Yeah.
But that accountability that they're held to is so different.
Well, we've gone past accountability and like fair punishment, and we've gone to the point where people's lives are being destroyed over very basic crimes. And a lot of, I mean, certainly, you know, driving under the influence is definitely should be a crime.
Yep.
You know, but there's so many other things that are like, you know, there's just so many things that are a crime that necessarily probably shouldn't be.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, there's lots of drug reform that can be done.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I mean,
at this point, anybody being arrested for any sort of marijuana offense, that in and of itself
should be the crime. Yeah. Right.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, and again, I know there are people out there that are going to disagree with that, but if you do, you're stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you believe in liberty and you also are a marijuana prohibitionist, you don't actually believe in liberty.
I would agree with that. You know, and again, I mean, people want to debate gateway and whatever. I think that's bullshit. I mean, and in my experience of years of
and so does the gateway to cookies. Is the is the gateway to being overweight? Is the gateway to obesity?
Well, and I've been working with this.
Where do you draw the line on personal responsibility?
Right.
You know, we can't ban everything that people can do dangerous things to their body because you know you can't.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you look at countries that have decriminalized and or straight up legalized these chemicals, I mean, you know, historically for us, prohibition hasn't worked out real well for anything.
Mm-hmm.
No, again, I mean, I get, like, I work with people who have heroin addiction, and it is the most devastating thing that I have seen. You know, I mean, maybe not the most, but it's terrible.
Just because you want drugs to be legal and regulated doesn't mean you want people to be heroin addicts.
Right, exactly. But that's where people want to go with that, and that's like, now I've thrown this out there.
It's just a stupid straw man argument, logical fallacy.
Well, what it is it's a slippery slope, which is not a valid argument from a logical perspective.
No,
now,
it's not.
People will debate that as well, you know, but it's a very common way to argue is that, well, this leads to this, and just like slow your roll on that just a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think, I mean, quite frankly, I think that if marijuana were available, first of all, medically, but second of all, also recreationally, however you want to characterize it, it would reduce significantly the dependence upon opiates that people have out there. I mean, you look at
There's plenty of data on that.
Yeah, and if you look at the ability to, you know, even pain management through even, I mean, you don't even need a prescription, in my opinion, but you know, you could take that opiate, which is a very destructive and highly addictive chemical that alters your ability to make any sort of decision. Now, I don't think you make necessarily, you get up and start taking giant bong rips and want to make real important decisions in your life. That maybe isn't a good plan, but you're much more capable of doing so than you are under the influence of an opiate, even if it's a prescribed opiate. I mean, I've taken, I've had surgery on my leg when I broke it, and I very little insight into it, but I had OxyContin for like 5 days, and a really low dose of it, and I'm a big dude, and I was incoherent. I had no idea what was going on.
Right.
I've smoked some weed in my day, and I've been a little silly, but I didn't do anything dumb other than maybe giggle. Try to make a bong out of an apple, maybe.
Nothing devastating.
Yeah. I wasn't out robbing anybody.
Ruined a couple of bags of Doritos.
Right. Yeah. I accidentally fell asleep with a pizza in the oven. But,
that's what we got smoke alarms for.
Right? Yeah. No, it's far different. And then the fact that it's still classified in the same category is
No. Marijuana is worse.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
Schedule 1 versus Schedule 2.
Yeah, which is beyond me, because they say that there's a
medical use.
Yeah, exactly.
There's medical use for cocaine too.
Oh, right? Yeah, it's awesome if you
lidocaine.
Tooth pain, any kind of pain.
you get a really bad sunburn, you'll get a lidocaine topical application.
The last tattoo that I got, they've got some lidocaine in this foam that calms it down a little bit, which I was really thankful for.
You can get those like heat patches. That you put on. They make those with lidocaine in them.
Yep, absolutely.
So I mean, it's a tiny amount of it's not gonna
for sure.
But yeah, so there's a medical use for cocaine, and you're gonna tell me that so I can get a patch that I can put on my thigh because I did fucking 12 miles of walking and didn't stretch, and it's got cocaine in it. There's a legal amount of cocaine. There's a legal reason to have that cocaine, and I can buy it at a freaking dollar store. But marijuana, just a flowery, leafy product. Like it's way more dangerous. There's no medical use for it. That's the most asinine point of view.
You look at the history of that too, and I mean, I think to some extent there's still people within the liquor lobby who are trying to keep the marijuana down, because I think. Quite frankly, I mean, I don't want people driving high either. I mean, I don't think that's a good idea. But I would much rather have somebody.
But if you have it legal, the likelihood of people driving high is probably less.
Oh, for sure.
I would imagine.
Colorado, from what I've seen, the statistics that they've shown is that they haven't had any increase.
The increase. They've shown an increase in auto accidents, but it has been proportional or even lower than the increase in population.
Right. Yeah.
So it's statistically an anomaly at best.
Right. Well, and I don't. I mean, I just, you look at things like domestic abuse and whatever. Ain't nobody getting high and getting in a fight. Or arguing.
And why are people driving high right now? Because they're 16 to 18 years old. They're still living in their parents' house, and it's the one place that they can go. They can get in their car with their friends, and they can drive around and get high.
Right.
If it's legal, then there's no reason to get in your car and run around and hide from your parents to get high.
For sure.
Well, and I guess it would be the same group of people who would still not be legally able to get it.
Probably,
and at that point, it's like it's a black market now. It would be a black market to them.
Right.
If anything, it would reduce the chance of people underage being able to get it, because now it's legally available, and who's going to go to the black market?
Right.
I don't see any kids buying black market cigarettes.
Not terribly often. No.
Somebody else buys them for them or whatever. But how often does that even happen?
And I think, and I mean, I think you would support this as well. I mean, you talk about tax revenue that could be sales tax.
Yeah.
I mean,
the cost benefit analysis of stopping stop prosecuting marijuana laws and let these people
Lord.
out of jail and forgive them so they're not a felon and allow them to be productive. I mean, you're infusing so much work into the economy.
Yep.
I mean, this is a product that basically everybody, over 50% of America probably wants. Marijuana, THC,
Sure.
Gummies, CBD, something in some form or another. And right now, all that money is pouring to. Most of that money is going to illegal cartels in Mexico.
Yep.
It's just
not to mention what you could do with hemp production.
Yeah. I mean. Yeah.
I saw that you mentioned
you
something
stop
about
spending money on all these programs to stop marijuana from being a thing, and you legalize it, and it actually becomes a money creator instead of something you're spending money on.
Well, I mean, as a cash crop, and then again, if you look at what hemp can be used for, and not just marijuana, but hemp. They're not necessarily. They're related, but. There are still a lot of places you can't legally grow just hemp.
Yeah.
And if you look at how that can be used, from an ecological perspective to make clothing, to make plastics, to make fuels.
Everything. Rope, food, paper.
Yeah, it grows so much faster than trees and all this stuff. So you could see a significant benefit agriculturally from it as well.
Yeah, right now we're paying farmers to grow corn so that we can make it into fake sugar and ethanol to put into our gasoline, which it has no benefit at this point. At one point we thought we needed ethanol to stretch out the gas because we were afraid how much.
It gives you a lot worse gas mileage too.
It doesn't make any sense at all. The amount of energy and fuel you put into creating the ethanol to then stretch out the gasoline, cost-benefit analysis, it doesn't make any sense.
Well,
so we're growing all this corn we don't even need to. We convert millions of acres of corn that literally get turned into sugar and gasoline into hemp, which can be made into thousands of products, or at least hundreds of products.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where there's a lobby for the corn producing, and it's not. This ain't your small family farmer. This is Cargill.
No, yeah, exactly. This is Monsanto Farms. This is
So there's a big industry there that like you said. They're producing all this stuff that we don't really need, but it benefits huge corporations. Again, this isn't benefiting, Joe that lives down in south of town or whatever. This is these big corporate entities that are profiting from those things. If it were somehow supporting the local family that goes to the farmer's market, I would have less of a problem with it, but it doesn't.
That's not the corn they grow.
No, not at all.
No, yeah.
Yeah, that's not corn meant for human consumption.
Yeah.
Or even animal consumption, I don't think. But there's a lot of really weird things, and that, you have to be able to defeat the power of the lobby in order to get meaningful legislation passed. And therein lies a huge problem with the dysfunction of our government as a whole. And again, this is a bipartisan issue because both parties are taking donations from these people. And, it's just that you follow the money. It boils down to the fact that people need money to get elected. These big corporations have it, and they're going to probably play both ends because they want people on both ends of the spectrum to support them. And when you come in and you say you're part of this agricultural lobby, particularly if you're from the Midwest as a person, that sounds like a good thing. Well, I'm supporting this agriculture program, but it doesn't help people. Yeah, really. So this is another bigger issue of, I think, removing the private donations from politics. You know, I mean, if you look at some of these other models in other countries where, there are publicly funded campaigns and there are shortened periods, so that we're not campaigning all the time. I mean, you look at a U.S. representative like we got Stauber now in from Duluth. They're elected on a 2-year cycle. So as soon as they go to the office, they're starting to campaign again.
Yeah, they're fundraising for 2 years.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just perpetual, and it doesn't really allow for any meaningful legislation to happen. I mean, you're campaigning, you show up for some votes, you make some sound bites on the TV if you can, and then you're just right back in it. And
I think House of Representative terms, I think, need to be expanded to 4 years.
Sure.
It doesn't really make any sense to me that we have senators for 6 and representatives for 2. It's such a quick turnaround. It doesn't make
really
any sense.
Too much. I mean, even the president's 4 years.
So. The other thing I think we could do is have. I think instead of having term limits, I think we should have sort of a maximum amount of years that you can serve altogether. So like you put in 2 terms with, as in the House, and then you try to move up to the Senate, and you get, whatever it is, you get 20 years total. So you have to figure out as a politician, boy, do I just want to stay in the House? Do I want to move up to the Senate? Do I want to become a whip? Do I want to go for the presidency? It makes
that makes some sense.
Makes going into politics, it makes a little bit more strategy than just overall term limits. Where like you need to figure out as the politician what offices do you want to run for because you have the max.
Well, I think there's something to be said for experience too, because
absolutely,
when you get in, like,
you really shouldn't expect something from a first-year person in the House.
Right.
My God,
like no matter how much you think you know about how things work, once you get there, it's a whole other story. I mean, I've always said, man, like regardless of what job you have, when you start a new job, typically it's a good 6 months before you're kind of competent at the day-to-day. You can do everything. And that's even if you've had a lot of experience. I mean, if you start in a new kitchen, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, so you're probably up to speed a lot quicker than 6 months. But, in a lot of jobs, going to a different company or whatever, learning the policies and all that stuff, you got a good 6 months before you're pretty competent, and 6 years or a year before you're really comfortable. And the learning curve on something like becoming a legislator at a federal level, again, even if you've done it at the state level, and I've had some tangential, interaction with state legislators and I see a little bit of the workings of that, but man, this is complicated. There's nothing easy about how you try to get something done in that mess. So to become effective and influential and get on the right committees and all that stuff, I mean, that's like when we had James Oberstar was our representative here for decades. But his experience allowed him to be on some very influential committees. Because that's how you move up committee-wise and all that stuff is based on your experience and all that stuff. The freshman incoming representatives very seldom are put on any committees that are influential. So every time we elect a new representative, I mean, it's good to get new blood, but you also lose that experience and ability to be an influencer. So, I mean, there's good and bad. But I like your concept of having an overall, like, this,
block
you
of
got
time.
this time.
Yeah,
I mean, but again, these people that
25 years of public service.
People that are really big on term limits. Again, that's the problem that I see with it is like you go 2 terms, that's it. I'm like, are they able to do anything meaningful or effective? I mean, the first part of it, they're just learning. The second part of it, maybe now you're finally getting up to speed. I mean, I've said this before about law enforcement, because historically, law enforcement, if you had enough time in from when you started, you could retire by about 50 I mean, that's progressed. It's not that way so much anymore, but there was a pretty good chunk of time that you could retire by 50 if you had enough time in.
Yeah.
And the
Which makes
unfortunate
sense
Oh, yeah,
because you want police to be able to physically,
Absolutely.
even if they're, like a detective and they're,
Sure.
sitting at a desk 90% of the time, you want them to be physically capable of
Yes.
going out and performing.
But the other side of that is that's when they're starting to know what they're really doing.
Right? Yeah, sure.
That is when, because guys that are getting toward that end part of their career are starting to recognize that you don't just have to kick everybody's ass.
Right.
That you can accomplish a lot of what you need to with words and with empathy and with understanding.
Yeah.
And again, I know there are sometimes that's not possible.
Then so you find leadership positions for them. You get them to train this knowledge that they have. Something. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying, kind of related to term limits, is that you get folks that are kind of getting to the point where they're just really good. And I've said this to several officers that I've known who've retired. I was like, man, you were just getting good. And they kind of laugh. But I think they understand that as well, a lot of them, because people who, maybe even started their career as I'm going to kick ass and take names type, often as they advance in their career, start to understand that there are multiple approaches that don't end in people getting hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think if we change this model, give them not a term limit but a block of years.
Yep.
We give longer terms to the House of Representatives, and maybe we decrease the power of the presidency. We can.
Or just put it back to where it was.
Right, yeah, put it where it's supposed to be. Maybe we can, not lose good politicians once they become the president.
Right.
Because, boy, Obama realistically had some great political years left, but where do you go after you're president?
Yeah, you kind of peak.
Yeah, you kind of peak, right? Like, what if that was just sort of a cycle? Like, it's your terms as president, but you know what? I still got another 8 years of public service. I'm going to go back and do one more term as a senator.
Right.
That's not a thing you do now.
No.
But maybe if the president wasn't on such a fucking high pedestal, maybe that wouldn't be such a fucking far step down, and we could,
Right.
I mean, hey, you obviously just got a lot of experience being president.
Right.
Maybe you could bring that experience, back into the House, back into the Senate. Yeah.
Well, it's like you look at, look at the Brainerd City Council charter. The mayor, and people always want to say that the mayor is an important role. It is, but they don't have a vote.
Yeah.
They do in a tie, so the mayor can do a tiebreaker. But the mayor, in a lot of ways, doesn't have a lot of power in our city's charter. So if you look at the presidency, the president has a lot of power to these executive orders and stuff. But realistically, should they? I mean, the president doesn't legislate, and they shouldn't. I mean, they come in with an agenda that needs to be promoted. However in the hell that happens. I mean, that's
right. Yeah.
Quite the complicated system. But a president is not a legislator. I mean, they sign bills, they veto bills. I mean, those powers that have been there since the beginning. Make sense. And again, we aren't electing a king. We're not electing a dictator. We're not electing the end-all, be-all of everything. We're electing a person to represent the people. And unfortunately, the vast majority of the time, that person tends to represent about 52.
Oh, not
if
even.
We're lucky.
No, not even. You gotta remember.
Probably 30%.
You gotta remember,
people,
most people don't vote.
Right. So
and then
on a good
lot
day,
of
maybe
people,
it's 30%.
A lot of people can't vote because they're felons.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the two parties collectively, you're looking at about 40%, 50% of the country at best. At best. So yeah, when you'll hear from the media, like he doesn't represent half the country, he's insulting half the country, and it's like, man, half the country doesn't even vote. You realistically can't judge what side of the political aisle they would be on if they're not voting.
Right.
But
I think realistically we got about 30%.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And then you look at the extremes. You're looking at 10% of the 30% that they're sharing. You know, right. I mean, we're talking about fractions of individuals that are very vocal.
Yeah.
When we talk about Antifa and white supremacists and stuff, sure. I think it's really important to remember how small of a fraction of our society that is. A very small fraction.
Small percentage.
Yeah.
I think they need to be less.
Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. It would be nice if they would be rational,
right.
and step out of their echo chamber and be willing to have rational conversations.
Yeah.
But
there's some folks that are just never gonna listen or get it. And I mean, it's sad. It's unfortunate. I mean, I think I tend to believe overall that people are inherently good for the most part. I mean, have I met some evil, without remorse, scary people in my life? I absolutely have. They are the exception, not the rule. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be some people out there that just aren't right. And in that, I don't mean aren't correct. I mean, there's just something wrong.
Yeah. Some bad wiring in their brain.
Yeah, that sometimes is not fixable.
Yeah.
And that's really sad and really unfortunate, but it exists. But the vast majority of people, I think, are trying to be happy, trying to live a life that they believe is their ideal. Mm-hmm. That's why, like I've said so many times before, that when people sit down and actually have a conversation, a lot of times we want the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we have different approaches, certainly, to those same things. But when we can sit down and humanize it.
If we have a common goal, then we can discuss the approach to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's truthfully where good government could happen. I mean, and there were eras of better compromise. I mean, there's certainly been a lot of fighting throughout the entire history of our government, but there
we're
are
at least not dueling anymore.
Well, right? Yeah, they haven't shot each other in a while. Though sometimes I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily want to go back to that, but there every now and then
maybe Congress would be a lot more polite place,
right? Yeah.
Well, the House of Representatives is armed now.
Well, that's like I said about the Facebook too. I mean, I'm pretty sure that most people who have called me names and said some pretty nasty things to me wouldn't be as inclined to do that if they were standing in front of me.
Oh God, no! It's so dehuman. You're so separated.
Yeah.
And it's also so hard to misunderstand and misinterpret people.
For sure.
When you're using text. Oh my God! I've been saying for a decade we need a sarcasm font,
right.
I mean we still sometimes it's like, are you being sarcastic?
It's hard to tell.
You literally have to ask some people sometimes, So the idea that we're always understanding each other perfectly via text, it's just never going to happen. Mm-hmm. And then, miscommunication and heated arguments. It doesn't lead to anything.
Yeah.
I'm trying to discuss philosophy is always going to be much more productive face to face.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I typically consider myself to be a fairly decent communicator, but there are so many times that I've said something in jest that has fallen completely flat or been taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, even verbally, face-to-face, I've done that. I mean, I think we all have. But, through text, I mean, particularly when I've been in relationships with people. Oh, my goodness. I mean, there have been several occasions where I've said something via text, and, then you get the no response, and then all of a sudden you see the ...
It disappears. dot
And you're like,
disappears.
danger.
I've got a flip phone nowadays.
There you go.
Yeah, dude. Like, I mean, so yeah, and then I've got an iPhone that I use for like podcasts, but it doesn't have any internet connection.
Sure.
You know, unless I'm in a spot that has Wi-Fi. So yeah, like, and yeah, that is very intentional. Like, you can't just get my attention any way you want. And I usually have it like turned on to vibrate. You know, so like, you know, like having long text conversations and, you know, ending up getting in some sort of disagreement, argument with my girlfriend is literally something that I'm preventing from happening technologically.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, if you really want to misunderstand somebody.
Genius, everybody out there. If this is an issue in your life, consider moving to a flip phone.
Yeah, no, it's a tough thing to manage sometimes, and yeah, everybody. I mean, these days people don't. I mean, even I'm guilty of this. It's easier to text somebody than it is to actually call them. Mm-hmm. But when I'm at work, like when I'm having conversations that have an impact on a human life outside of my own, I call people. I mean, I don't even like emails in a lot of ways. I mean, I like emails for certain things because then you have a written record of it.
Yeah.
But when I have a complex thing to discuss, which often I do because of the nature of my job, I want to have an actual conversation because I want those people I'm talking to be able to ask questions.
Yeah.
So I know they understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to clarify, and I want to be able to clearly articulate exactly what I'm trying to. And it's to me anyway easier to do verbally than it is to do by written word. I mean, I can put stuff in an email that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But I have the context in my head.
Oh yeah.
And I try to, again, the effective communication, try to give people, you know, the context of the situation as best I can, but I don't always succeed in that. I mean, when I took over my job, there was a person that had done it before me for several years, and then she had retired, and I kind of took the job after it had been vacant for months. So it was kind of a mess. And I went into it, and I went back, and I was trying to recreate some stuff with the case notes that she had written and whatever to get an understanding. Her case notes were written with her knowledge and her context.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would look in a person's file and see a case note like, talked to Steve the other day, and we're just going to keep doing what we were doing. What the fuck does that mean? You know, like to the person who had the job. There we go. But to the person who had the job before me, like she knew what was going on, so that was awesome. Like I'm sure it made sense to her. But when I came in and I was trying to figure out what the hell that meant, I didn't even know who Steve was.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
or what they were doing.
Yeah. like I need a little bit more to that. But again, I mean, to her, you know, I'm sure she was in a hurry, having a, you know, whatever.
Made sense.
And just needed to get something in there so that it was somewhat documented. And like, I get that. I mean, not best practices to do it that way, but I get it.
Yeah.
But that's so, I think, representative of the communication problems that we have currently with the technology that we have and whatever is, you know, that's the kind of thing that we deal with every day. I talked to Steve and we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. And everybody's looking at you going, what?
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, as a chef and somebody who had to do event planning, like I totally, like, you know, like somebody will contact you like, hey, I want to do this catering event or whatever. You exchange a couple emails of some basic information.
Sure.
But ultimately, like, you pretty much the best way to figure everything out is to sit down with each other. Like a phone call is okay, but sitting down together is even better. And being able to ask that person questions. Okay, what about, you know, like all sorts of things. Because as a chef, I'm going to come up with questions regarding the event that they're not going to think of.
For sure.
They're going to ask me, questions that I hadn't thought of, and, like that layering of discussion to make things run smoothly, I think is something that is sort of being downplayed by I say, especially like over social media, like, man, there's no way we can probably have these discussions and come to some sort. There's no way, if we're at opposite ends of the spectrums, that we can, via
social media is not going to promote us coming together
via text to get that. At best we will be able to find some common ground. But if you really want to have a philosophical discussion with this person and get deep into, what's the approach, or how do we agree or disagree on these subjects? Like, you're going to have to do it face to face, because ultimately you're either just going to misunderstand each other or get upset with each other, like online. So yeah, that's something that I'm very much trying to like step back from, of just like, man, you can't argue with these people forever, like, if they're bringing a slight perspective, if you're already pretty close, you can probably have a good discussion. Right. But if somebody's on the opposite end of the spectrum, if somebody's telling me that, police death isn't going to happen under socialism, there's no way I'm going to convince them otherwise. Right. It's never going to happen.
Well, and that's, again, why I tend to only comment to people that I've known for a long time or that I know well. Because the hope is that they don't take my comment in a negative way.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they don't, because they certainly still do sometimes. And I try to be as innocuous and generic as possible oftentimes when I'm doing that, but it doesn't always pan out. I mean, people still get their feathers ruffled, and it's going to happen. And I mean, I get too. I mean, there's sometimes people post stuff, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I start sounding like Yosemite Sam. But I try to take a step back. Like I posted a quote from Obama not long ago, and again, that he's not everybody's favorite person. But, said something about, when ignorant people are talking, you just let them talk. I'm paraphrasing because that's not the whole thing. And it gave me a little bit of pause, and I'm like, sometimes, I should just let people dig their hole.
Yep.
But a lot of times I think where I struggle with that is it's not because people are trying to be ignorant.
Yeah.
Or they're not trying to present something in an ignorant way, or it's somebody that I know personally to not be ignorant, but what they're saying from what I'm seeing sounds that way. So that's typically where I throw something out there and go, well, what about this?
Yeah, I've really come to appreciate more and more the Socratic method, because, like, either you can sort of let them expose themselves and how ridiculous their point of view truly is by asking them some simple questions.
Right.
Or you can just like get them to honestly think about what their point of view is and why they are philosophically coming from it. It's so much, I find it so much more effective to ask people questions about, okay, do you believe this? Okay, well, based off that statement, what, to ask them questions and let them suss it out themselves rather than like saying, well, I think you're wrong and this is my point of view on it, and just like making this bold statement, with sort of no other context other than, I think you're wrong, and here's my opinion, which I feel is right.
Right. So one of my friends recently posted something that said, is anybody going to vote for walls again after all this? And I responded by saying, yes, I'm not here to argue about this. I'm just answering your question. So
obviously, some people are still going to vote for him.
Right. It's sort
of it's begging the question at best. It's ridiculous.
So then I had another friend respond to me, and even though I indicated that I wasn't there to argue, he said, "I understand that you'll vote for party no matter what, but this doesn't make a lot of sense. And I was like, wait a minute. And again, I wasn't there to argue, and I wasn't trying to start an argument. I was simply answering the question that had been posed.
Yep.
And I said in response, I don't vote for party, and there are a lot of people who do, but I think a lot of people don't. And what I said was I did vote for Walz this last time around. He was not my first choice for governor, but he was the choice that most closely aligned with my perspective at that time of that election. So if you put somebody out there who I think is better, I have no problem voting. I mean, if you put in place an independent or a Republican who more closely aligns with my ideas than Governor Walz does, I would have no problem voting for that person. You know, and I know people want to, like you've talked about tribalism a lot before, you know, people want to equate it to that. You know, and again, this kind of sort of goes back to the lesser of two evils that we always seem to be faced with. I mean, I don't know that there ever has been a candidate that I've looked at and gone, oh my God, I agree with everything that person says. I vote for the one that more closely aligns with what I believe in. And, you know, historically that tends to be Democratic candidates. That doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, I've voted for some independents before. You know,
Were you would you, if you don't mind me asking, did you vote for Jesse Ventura or?
I lived in Wisconsin
at
the time.
Would you have voted for Jesse Ventura, I guess, is the better question.
You know, I don't even remember who else was running against him.
Neither do I.
You know,
there was an incumbent who I think was Arnie Carlson, but I'm not sure.
Old honest Arnie.
As
he liked to call himself.
I'm not sure. I like Arnie Carlson historically for one reason. I was 16 years old. I was trying to dig out my car from a giant snowdrift. It was below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, below zero.
Sure.
And I was trying desperately to dig the car out to get to school. And my mom opened the door and said, Arnie Carlson canceled school statewide because our school district was the only school district which had not canceled school for the day. We were delayed 2 hours, and Arnie had to step in to cancel it statewide. So historically, that's the only thing I remember about Arnie Carlson, but I like him for it. Like, he stepped in over the superintendent who was being a dumb asshole.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, I couldn't believe it. It was so cold. I was buried in a snowdrift, and I'm trying to get to school. This is insane.
Yeah, I remember that winter. I was going to school up at UMD, and it was so cold that I remember he canceled everything statewide.
Yep.
Yeah, that was an ugly week.
Yeah, and he did it statewide because.
Right.
Yeah, there was one school. The Whittle Falls School District was the superintendent was holding out that he would not cancel school.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to have voted for Jesse. I was a third party proponent before I was even able to vote.
Sure.
But my birthday is November 16th. The election was literally
after.
It was literally like 10 or 12 days. My birthday was after. Yeah, my 18th. So,
I don't know if I would. I mean, again, I don't remember who the other choices were during that time.
It's an unfair question, really. 21 years ago, who knows what you would have done, right?
Well, and I was probably a little bit different human back then too. But, I mean, I'm not opposed to. I mean, I know he was bandying about running at the Green Party as a presidential candidate.
That's dead in the water.
Yeah. But I
think he just likes to. He said that 4 years ago too. He just likes to drum up a little attention for himself every 4 years.
Well, you want to stay relevant. He still has a podcast and other stuff going on, he has some conspiracy theories.
He had a show, conspiracy theory for a while. I don't know if his podcast is still going either.
Yeah. Well, he's getting up there. He might retire too. But there have been things that Ventura has said that I agreed with.
He's got some great books, actually.
Yeah, and he's made a lot of sense. There's sometimes that I look at him and go, what now? So there's
everybody does.
right. So there's that too. You know, again, I mean, there's no
never
perfect
going to
candidate.
agree with somebody 100%
Right.
of the time. Yeah.
But you know, I can say that I would absolutely vote for him over Donald Trump.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's
Absolutely.
no question in my mind that if the choice were Donald Trump or Jesse Ventura
Or Joe Biden.
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I'm not always a fan of everything Joe Biden does. He was certainly not my first choice. He appears to be the shit sandwich that we are being served yet again.
Right.
I will absolutely vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. I don't like Joe Biden necessarily as a candidate.
I feel you 100%.
Yeah.
I'm totally going to vote for Joe Jorgensen. She would not. She was not my candidate. She's not who I wanted as the Libertarian Party nominee. Am I voting strictly because of party lines? No. I'm still voting for the candidate who I think is best based off their experience and their alignment with my philosophies. Yeah.
Sure, and I think that makes the sense. And I think that's what a lot of people would say. I mean, do people vote? I mean, this thing, when you look at these national elections and you look at your ballot, and there are so many offices that people are running for, is it easy to be well informed about each candidate and what they're doing? No.
God.
So has there been a time that I have voted for someone just because they had a D next to their name? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't feel good about that necessarily, because if I don't know, and I work really hard. I mean, I'm pretty conscientious when it comes to voting, and I try, like when it comes to judges, because they don't necessarily have a party, particularly the district court judges. So a lot of times I reach out to my friends in the legal community. I mean, I have my father's an attorney, but I also have a lot of friends who are attorneys or maybe work with law enforcement or whatever. And I'll say, hey, if there's a judge I'm voting for, if I don't know, if I'm not familiar with who they are, I'm like, well, what do you think about this person? Is this somebody that we want to still have? I mean, because the judge is a very influential position at the local level. And so the ones that we vote for, the district court and what have you, and we vote for Supreme Court, I think, too, in Minnesota. I want to make sure that I'm making an informed choice as best I can. In these local races, it's not like you can do a whole lot of internet research necessarily, because whatever,
you could, but it would be so time consuming to try to find a judge's record and pour through all of these different decisions.
Yeah, and then, like for city council and stuff, and county board, and I mean, I pay attention to that. In a lot of those cases, I've had interaction with people too, so I maybe have met them personally, which is a pretty big influence. And I also pay attention to how they vote for things on the board, because I mean, that's important to me. Even though I don't work necessarily in Crow Wing County anymore, I live in Crow Wing County, and my clients occasionally have things to do in Crow Wing County, and I have a lot of friends who work in Crow Wing County. So it's important to me that we have a county board that is informed and making choices that make sense to me. They ain't gonna make sense to everybody, but so again, I try to be as informed as I can. And again, I mean, I don't necessarily vote for anyone just because of what their party affiliation is. I mean, there are plenty of Democrats out there that I don't like, but again, it just, that tends to be the end of the spectrum that aligns more with my personal views.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think if I've ever voted for a Republican, and I don't know off the top of my head that I have. And again, it's not to say that I wouldn't.
I generally have a very colorful ballot.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I voted for Josh Heisman before as the one Republican I can think of in the last decade or so that I've voted for, at least on a local level. I don't think I've ever voted for a Republican on a national level.
Sure.
But Heisman's honestly lost my vote at this point because of his stance on marijuana.
Yeah. Well, I'm not.
And I mean, here I align with him on small business, on Second Amendment,
guns, sure.
But man, like, he takes such a preposterous stance on marijuana prohibition and is unwilling to listen. He lost my vote.
Yeah, well, and I'm not a fan personally. I mean,
I wouldn't imagine you would be. As much as we have in common, and then me and Josh have things in common, like you have probably fractions.
Yeah, I breathe oxygen. I'm pretty sure he does.
Yeah,
I don't think that it gets to his brain.
Oh, come on now. Let's be civil here at the Electric Church.
Yeah, but
he's not here to defend himself.
No, he's not. But I have.
It's one thing to trash national politicians.
Sure,
we can shit talk Trump or Biden all we want.
Well, they deserve it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, as far as local politics goes, I mean, and the problem that often happens is that you find the people who would be great in those roles
don't run for them.
Right. And the people who end up in those roles typically get involved because they have some sort of personal issue that they want to address. And then they tend to get sucked into the system and get eaten up by all this stuff. I mean, the thing about Heisman, I mean, I think a lot of what he says is prepared for him.
Oh, I'm not going to disagree with that at all.
So,
I think and he's what, 2 terms now he's served?
Yeah,
He'll be going for his third.
Like that,
yeah. He's in that spot where he kind of just needs to be a yes man for the party.
Yeah.
It's I don't think that he can necessarily. He has no interest in even discussing outside of what the party frame is. Exactly. Yeah.
And I think
it's not going to benefit him and his political career to step outside of the party this early, so he's just not going to do it.
And I think as far as
that's another criticism of the two-party system and the structure that we have.
Yeah, and I'm sure that he's a decent human being and believes in what a lot of the things are that he's saying and believing to be doing a good thing. I don't agree with him, and that's fine. I mean, I certainly don't have a problem with that. But like you alluded to, I mean, when people aren't willing to have the discussion, that's where I struggle.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been in Carrie Rood's office down at the state, and she's a Republican leader from the area. She's our senator. State senator. And, I went down there when I was, working on some homelessness issues. And I met with her and spoke with her in her office, and she was very gracious. And, we talked about homelessness and how it impacts people who have mental health problems. And she had some personal knowledge and experience with that she was able to draw from. And, I didn't disagree with what she was saying. And I don't think she disagreed with what I was saying either. And that's the thing is when you can have the discussion. I mean, will I vote for Carrie Rood? I don't know. I don't. At this point, I don't even know who's running against her, or if she's even up this. I don't know. There's so much going on. I haven't been paying attention to everything.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's an election going on in 6 months, and the world's on fire, and half of it's closed down.
Yeah. But she's, she at least was reasonable enough to have a conversation with me and not treat me like I was from a different planet and whatever. And that I respect.
Yeah.
Now, I may not always like the way she votes. I may not always like what she supports. I mean, she made a comment about Walls keeping the gyms closed that I thought was a little bit of a misstep because she made some comment which seemed to refer to him being out of shape by saying that he hasn't seen the inside of a gym. Which, there's some humor to that.
But that's right up there with Pelosi calling Obama.
Well, that's again,
Trump,
I don't like all those things that these people say. I'm looking at them like, what the fuck are you talking about, man?
They like to get their digs in. You know?
They do.
That's all it is.
Yeah. But again, sometimes I'm just like, I don't know if that's necessary.
It's not. It can be entertaining.
Sure, and this is again one of the problems that I have with
that's at least a little clever, unlike just like obese, like just straight up saying obese. At least saying that's kind of clever. That's a good joke.
Yeah, but
I can appreciate. I can appreciate the structure of the humor.
Yeah. The senator, I think, actually, she works out. I mean, she looks to be in pretty good shape I mean, she's not young, but she's probably a pretty active person, I guess.
Apparently, she eats a bunch of ice cream too, so she's gotta work out to burn off those calories,
right?
Yeah.
But the thing, I guess, is the level of political discourse sometimes has deteriorated, and I'm guilty of it. But I'm not.
And Trump has deteriorated more than anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, there's straight up politicians just saying "fuck you" to other politicians on Twitter now.
Right.
That wouldn't have happened pre-Trump.
No.
He is definitely just took political discourse and just just gave it a swirly.
He's throwing it out the window.
Yeah, I mean, mudslinging was bad before, and now it's just man, you guys are just in the mud pit together.
Well, there used to be somewhat of an art to it, and he has decreased that to just.
Oh, he's just a troll.
It's guttural noises.
Yeah. I mean, it's he's an internet troll come to life.
Right.
He literally just trolls humans in reality.
He's effective at it, but it's at a fourth grade level.
Yeah. I mean, it's nothing that belongs in political discourse.
No, or just society in general. I mean, if you're a fourth grader and you're calling somebody poopy pants.
Yeah, I mean,
okay, whatever. You're 4.
Exactly.
Or not 4, but whatever age a fourth grader is. I don't know. 10, 12.
Yeah, something like that.
So, which I expect from a 10-year-old. I don't expect from a 70-some-year-old professional.
Right? Yeah.
But it's I don't know, the overall thing, again, sort of pulling it back to the two parties and whatever. I don't vote for party, and I think a lot of people, again, would say similar things, that if you put up somebody from a differing perspective that aligns more with my values as a voter, I would be comfortable voting for that person. But the parties, even local representatives, they get into that system and they just sort of toe the line. Mm-hmm. I mean, I look at John Ward, who was a person in Heinzman's position previously, who had run as a Democrat and was a representative from our area. He was not a toe-the-line Democrat because he was a pro-life Democrat, which is pretty far outside the platform and a pretty strong stance to take when you're running as a Democrat,
but not in rural Minnesota.
No, that's part of the reason that I think he was elected.
Absolutely, I think rural Minnesota is someplace where that can totally exist. A pro-life Democrat can very much exist and get elected. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's sort of the important thing when you look at particularly local politics. I mean, I talk about these things, like county commissioners. They don't have a political affiliation. Mm-hmm. They're not Democrat or Republican. The DFL doesn't come in and say we're endorsing this candidate, which I think is important, because I don't think they should, because local issues shouldn't be frickin' partisan.
Yep.
Same with city council, shouldn't be partisan. And particularly in small communities. I mean, I know when you get to the bigger cities that you tend to have more of those things because they need more money, they need more political backing to support their candidacy. But even still, I mean, local community stuff shouldn't be Democrat or Republican. It should be what benefits our community. I mean, I look at stuff when I look at city politics, and I probably support some things that, as someone who tends to be on the left end of the spectrum, you wouldn't necessarily think that I would say. But because it makes practical sense for the community. Mm-hmm. And I think that is again, what we're missing on all kinds of levels, is that, does this make sense?
Yeah.
For what we're trying to do here? I've said multiple times on this podcast, I don't have all the answers.
No, that's okay. I do.
But I appreciate other perspectives because sometimes people get me to look at things differently, and I go, you know what, that makes some sense.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I don't know if I've said it specifically on this podcast before, but yeah, I mean, I grew up with very conservative parents, so I was like a Republican probably until I was about 13, 14 years old.
Sure.
As odd as that sounds.
Yeah.
I
Well, yeah,
was
people are products of their environment.
Yeah, third party proponent until about age. Oh, geez, actually, third party. I mean, forever since then, really. But I became far more liberal going to CLC. I really swallowed the blue pill there, and was like a bit fucking straight up socialist until I was about 27. At like years of like just
Life experience.
Exactly, yeah. And I like started having more and more conversations with people. And yeah, around 27, 28, started to discover sort of libertarianism. Now, 39 years old, I feel like I really started to grasp the philosophy in the last 3 years. Like 10 years of sort of playing with the idea before I really got it, you know? So yeah, I mean, I went from not being old enough to vote, but would have been a Republican, to voting Green Party, to voting just about every party, and now pretty much a whining libertarian. But I'll still I'll vote for a third party that I wouldn't vote for, that I don't want in office, but I would rather give my vote to that third party than the two major parties.
Sure.
So, like, I would vote for a socialist, even though I would weigh, like, I'm going to align probably with either the Democrat or the Republican on the, you know, if there's a Democrat or Republican and, a Communist Party, I'll vote for the Communist Party just to not give my vote to the other two, even though I probably agree with the other two way more.
Sure.
That sounds obscene, but it makes logical sense to me because I just want those third parties to be heard, to have a chance.
And if they get enough percentage of the vote, then
their
it gives
voice,
them
more funding. It gives them access to the ballot. It helps them get their message out. Even if their message is completely wrong, go ahead and spout it, man. If you're talking bullshit, go ahead and speak
Well, it's that vermin supreme. I don't know that I agree with much of what he says.
Oh God,
But I get the point. You know, I mean,
I really have a lot of issues with Vermin Supreme as a libertarian because he is not a libertarian in any way, and I really wish he would.
Got some stuff going on.
He does. I mean, well, and I'm a mod of a Facebook page called Ask a Libertarian, and we were doing and we did Ask Me Anythings, and we did presidential debate, and there was a lot of questions where Vermin Supreme would just read from the LP platform instead of answering the question.
Yeah, that's not helpful.
No, it's not helpful. It's like, okay, you're reading our platform to us. We know our platform. You know, we know what our platform is.
Yeah.
You know, or at least we have access to it. You know what I mean? It is our party. You know, or the party that we're following. You know, it's just and. He's just not a libertarian. Like, I get that he's a political satirist.
Sure.
Keep your political satire outside of running for my political party for president. You go ahead and be a political satire on YouTube all you want.
Right.
Run as an independent. I don't care.
Sure, that would maybe be more fitting.
If you want to travel back in time to kill Hitler, give everybody a pony, and authoritarily force people to brush their teeth, you are not a libertarian. I get those are jokes. I get it. Don't care. You're not a libertarian. Stop pretending you're a libertarian. Don't bring negative ideas to libertarianism, because
I don't want to get into the weeds on the Tiger King or anything, but I mean, obviously Joe Exotic or whatever ran.
He's actually a pretty good example of libertarianism.
Sure, he's a character. I mean, obviously that docu-series or whatever the hell you want to call it had its own perspective on it, and I don't know that any of us can possibly comprehend the reality of the weirdness that was going on.
Oh
down there.
man, there's so many layers.
But yeah, I mean, it's that gentleman is certainly an enigma. But it was interesting to see his campaign manager guy, who I think probably is really a libertarian.
Oh yeah, he's a very good. Yeah, we did an Ask Me Anything with him.
Did you?
Yeah, it was. Oh yeah, he was a great guy. I've messaged with him a little bit. Yeah, openly gay.
Sure.
Gun-toting, Oklahoman. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, he's got a really great grasp on libertarianism. We had one of our best, I think, that got over like 1,000 shares and well over 10,000 views. He was one of our best Ask Me Anythings.
Yeah, I bet.
He represented libertarianism very well.
Yeah, but it was interesting to watch the series, and he was kind of like he didn't really have a lot of control necessarily over what was happening.
Oh God, no.
And
yeah, I love that quote where he said it was like the word, like being his campaign manager was like the worst experience of his life.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I mean, that whole process was just like a train wreck. I mean,
yeah,
you couldn't not watch it.
Oh.
You get sucked in. I mean, just the weirdness of it all. And the weird thing is, like, I mean, with my job and the people that I've worked with over the last 20 years or so, I've seen a lot of really weird stuff. So not a lot necessarily surprises me at this point in human nature.
Yeah.
But when and so the drama side of that whole thing didn't necessarily surprise me, but the big cat owning aspect of it was a new twist for me.
Right.
I mean, it's such a strange.
Oh yeah,
and probably very small community, because obviously there are not a lot of people out there who are licensed to own types of animals like that, and the underground of it and the black market selling.
Yeah,
it's just a weird world, man.
Yeah, there's more there's more tigers in Texas than there is in the wild.
Yeah, that's just crazy. And I mean, I love animals. I mean, I'm not a member of PETA or anything. I mean, I like eating animals too. I mean,
right.
It's not a thing, but I just I love animals. I mean, I've had pets, and I seeing the big cats and stuff. I mean, I certainly think that we want to preserve them.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hate to see them be extinct, because I think they're just amazing creatures.
Yeah, and isn't that how and doesn't that make that so much more complicated? Where you're like, boy, I don't know if these wild animals should be pets, but then there's more of them that are pets than are in the wild.
Right.
So maybe domestication is the only way this animal survives extinction.
Yeah, I definitely don't have the answers there.
Yeah, it's so layered, because it's so layered. It's so heavy. There's obviously so much that
I once
both of us as novices
knew a woman that had a bobcat for a pet. Mm-hmm. She lived south of town.
That sounds a little dangerous.
Yeah, and it she had to keep it on a chain because they could break through cables. And a bobcat,
chew through a layer, yeah.
Not a huge cat. I mean, it's like 30, 40 pounds, but that's a big. I mean, he's way bigger than a domestic cat.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly powerful creatures. I mean, if you think of your domestic 12-pound cat and how strong that animal is and how small it is.
Yeah.
And then you start gauging that up exponentially, the power that those things...
Yeah, you think about your cat, which is maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet long, can easily jump 4, 5, 6 feet in the air, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's incredible.
The muscle tension, the muscles are built differently,
Oh, yeah.
So, you take a 30-pound bobcat and you put it against a 200-pound man.
I'll tear you up.
That's a toss-up.
Well,
they have weapons and you don't.
Right?
They're just attached to them. You're gonna have to find something.
The murder mitts.
Yeah,
the claws. They're beautiful creatures, and again, I mean, I'm not. I don't know what my particular view is on it, but
Right.
I always thought it'd be cool if you remember that movie Desperately Seeking Susan with Madonna.
It sounds
and-
familiar, but I don't think I've ever
Well, it
seen
was
it.
an '80s Madonna movie. It was pretty cheesy, but they had like pet cougars.
Okay.
I think it was Desperately. No, it wasn't Desperately. Maybe it was Who's That Girl? I don't know. It was some stupid Madonna movie in the '80s. And they had the pets, but I always thought it'd be cool, to have a big cat like that. But they're wild animals. I mean, you see people, that have like a bear that they bring, like they train them for Hollywood, and you're talking these giant brown bears and stuff, and I'm just like, it'd be super cool to be able to like go pet one, but I don't know that I want one living in my home.
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
Anytime you get a creature that's that much bigger than a human, I'm a little leery of. I mean, even like cows, man. Cows are dangerous.
Yeah. You're telling me. I had a cow almost kick me in half when I was a teenager. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like dogs and cats of the domesticated variety, I'm pretty cool with.
I did have a dog chew on my head when I was a kid, too. I mean,
that's not fun.
Yeah. I mean, I got over it, but I have a very big scar on the top of my head.
Well, I was pretty scared of dogs until I became a full-grown adult and maybe understand and have had dogs since.
I only have an issue with Rottweilers and German Shepherds. They give me a little pause still. I was attacked by a German Shepherd, and it was just like...
Yeah. Well, they're animals that, depending on training and breeding, can certainly be...
Yeah.
I mean, I one of my friends that I've known for a long time has trained, the Belgian Malinois, or I don't know how to pronounce that necessarily, but as police dogs.
Yep.
And they're amazing creatures, beautiful animals, similar to a German Shepherd, but not.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what they used in South Africa, wasn't it? For police dogs.
Yeah, probably.
I think so.
Could be.
Yeah, I think
but
they're,
he's one of those. I mean, he's had them for years, and he's worked as a canine officer for a long time. And I think they're a particular breed of dog that you want to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you got one,
right?
You don't want to just go get one because they look cool. And I mean, I think that's similar in a lot of dogs. I mean, I'm a big fan of like heart and whatever, and rescue animals, and a lot of them are multiple mixed breeds, and I think generally you tend to get some pretty decent, just lovable creatures.
Oh yeah,
multiple mixed breed.
When you're talking about a purebred dog, you're talking about something that's inherently inbred,
right?
You're not like the genetic pool isn't actually all that great.
Right.
Like a mutt is what a dog should be.
Sure.
Yeah.
The one dog that I've had in my adult life since she was husky collie mix, which her temperament was awesome, wonderful dog, shed like crazy, which wasn't my favorite, but wonderful personality and really intelligent dog and fun. And the thing that I like about the husky piece of that is they kind of they vocalize a lot. They almost it's almost like they're trying to talk, and maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not a dog psychologist,
no,
but it's an interesting. I like that breed. Again, I don't like the shedding so much because she's a very white dog, and I have a tendency to wear a lot of dark colors.
Yeah,
so it was that was a struggle
for sure.
And I've had a number of cats over the years too. I mean, I like them all.
I like other people's pets the best.
Well, that's a nice thing is you
don't have to take care of them. Yep, don't have to take care of other people's pets.
Right.
Hi, doggy.
Right, that is sort of the nice piece of it. But
yeah. Shoot, we're approaching 2 hours on this file. We got to at least pause.
Sure.